If you went to university, did you find Young Labour unbearably preachy? Did you find the Young Greens insufferable? Did you find the Young Liberals to be extremely overbearing? Because that was certainly my experience at university, and I know for a lot of people, they experienced the exact same thing. And for me, I was put off Australian politics entirely, in part by the American right-wing rabbit hole that I fell down in that pipeline that was very common for 18-year-olds at the time to take. But I think also my exposure, I went to UNSW, and the young political parties, or just SRC politics, that's the other big thing that needs to be spoken about here, was just so unbelievably preachy and self-righteous that it just put me off Australian politics entirely, and I went away not wanting to have any involvement with it, which of course is not a solution. That's just going, I'm too pure for this and, and deciding it's not for me. But this was true for a lot of people in the Buck Holden Academy as well, which might surprise you. The Buck Holden Academy is not made up of people that were in Young Labour. There's like a handful of people, but a lot of the people were people who worked real jobs, were completely worked real jobs. That's insulting. But yeah, nah, stand by it. What is a real job? I've always wondered when people are like, politician's not a real job. It has to be this specific blue collar, changing diesel or whatever. Anyway, but this was a pretty common argument that people were making throughout the Buck Holden Academy, which was actually, I'm kind of grateful that I didn't go through the Young Labour pipeline because I have different experiences that I can bring to the table that I think are an actual asset to my local branch and possibly the prospects of me becoming a candidate down the track. And I've gone through different politicians and tried to categorize them into Young Labour versus not having involvement with Young Labour. And some very successful Labour politicians joined the Labour Party after the age of 25. But anyway, there is a lot of valuable life experience to be learned from whatever profession that you are in. I think when people are like, someone should spend a bit of time working this job, that will give them the requisite experience to become Prime Minister. Prime Minister just encompasses or anything in politics really, encompasses so many different professions that it's impossible to get collector's item experience on all of those. And so I think what's more valuable is perhaps less the circumstances that a person surrounds themselves with, but more their ability to reflect and to grow quickly through that exposure to said profession. Anyway, one of the guys at Buck Holden Academy was making the argument of, young political organizations attract a lot of people with idealism, energy, and enthusiasm. Some have even said that some people there are idealistically pragmatic, which on the surface is an oxymoron, but in Labour, because pragmatism is worn as a bit of a badge of honor, people become almost idealistic about it, and ironically make that the thing that they become very idealistic about. But it does just attract a lot of youthful people with perhaps some intolerance for other perspectives as well, that make cobbling together a coalition of people towards one particular political goal a little bit harder to do. So the general census was actually a pretty negative one of exposure to Young Labour and experience with Young Labour. Now, if you are listening to this and you're in Young Labour, obviously we're not saying you specifically, but we are just saying the perception that people have around youth political organisations. And it's pretty obvious, right? If you throw a lot of young people and ask them to create a movement. Again, its principles might be fantastic, but the ability to cobble together a coalition and to manage factional infighting and personality infighting, I think just younger people have far less skills to deal with that than more experienced politicians. So the youth politics put a lot of people off. However, if you are involved in youth politics, this is not me trying to persuade you out of leaving. That would be terrible. There are a number of things that I think you do get fast speed training on if you're involved in youth politics. Obviously, you have to do a lot of campaigning, which means you deal with a lot of rejection because you're not very good at it when you're in youth politics. You come across as too preachy, or you don't know how to approach people very well. And so you get battle hardened very quickly as well. Again, factions, even at SRC politics, right, you have factions. You learn to manage factions and how to basically not blow all of your political capital on one particular fight that just isn't worth it when you look at the broader agenda that you could achieve. And you also learn how to handle personality politics and dealing with particular people that are immovable objects in a particular organization that have to be dealt with, but also not appeased at the same time. And so you got all those difficult situations that you do actually learn in youth politics quite well. And if you look at Labor's track record, the young Labor president in New South Wales historically goes on to have a very successful political career. So you look at all of these big examples. You look at, obviously Keating was cutting his teeth in the 1960s, but then you go through, you've got Albo, you have Bob Carr, Chris Minns, what was he, 2003, I'm going to say? Tony Burke in the 90s as well ends up becoming a successful politician. It is a pretty common pipeline because it attracts people that are aspirational and they cut their teeth early on. And I think the key thing about all of these men is that they were reflective and able to learn quite quickly. And so whether it had been in youth politics or whether it had been just working as a mechanic, Paul Keating got his in through the Boilermakers Union. I think just the talent is there that just, different circumstances aside, I think they would have found a way to get to where they are. However, what I was particularly interested with was I went through some counter examples and found that also a lot of successful Labor politicians joined the party after the age of 25. So Bob Hawke, obviously he was involved in the Labor Party before, but just on a very casual basis. I think he was involved in his Labor club while at university. You've got Gough Whitlam, who at university had no Labor affiliation whatsoever. He, again, like me, found youth politics extremely off-putting and wanted to talk about global politics instead rather than what was going on in Australia. And one of his friends at university said he was far more primed to be a Liberal candidate than a Labor candidate. And there was a little bit of surprise when he ends up joining the Labor Party after World War II. You've got Neville Wran, who joins at 28 after setting up his legal practice. Now, again, he'd represented unions, so he had a lot of exposure, but he doesn't join the party until the age of 28. And then you have Joan Kirner, the Victorian Premier after John Cain Jr., and she joined the party at 37 years old after the Gough Whitlam dismissal because she was so outraged by what happened. So people joined the party significantly after what is usually considered the window that you have before you miss it, but they actually end up becoming very successful as well. And so for you, perhaps, again, if your politics aren't Labor, obviously find a political party that best aligns with how you view politics. But if you feel as though you're too old to join Labor, firstly, it's never too late to join whatsoever. But then secondly as well, your experience brings an asset to the table that a lot of people who have gone the traditional or more conventional pipeline don't have. And a lot of people think, okay, what we need blue collar representation, which is true. We want that in the Labor Party, but I don't think we actually want it to be solely blue collar. That's obviously a controversial thing to say because it feels like it's always politically okay to blue collar max. It's never okay to blue collar nerf. But if you just worked a regular professional job, then that is also a wealth of experience that you can bring to the table that will actually, A, give you expertise in one particular line of the workforce, but then B, as well, is also very transferable experience when you think about the politics of working within just a regular business organization, satiating this particular group, but also making sure you drive home an agenda and drive through reform at an acceptable enough pace as well to move your business in the right direction, or your management of said part of the business in right direction. These are all valuable experiences that you can bring to the party as well. And so don't think that is irrelevant experience that can be transferred over. You're a teacher. That's even if you're a private school teacher, that's still very relevant experience that can be brought to the table, not only in the field of education, but in also just managing staff as well, and being in an organization. So pretty much the only non-transferable experience is gaming throughout your 20s. But perhaps if you are younger and you are deeply off-put by the idea of being involved in Young Labor, but you do still have a cursory interest in Australian politics, that is okay. You can actually keep going at that trajectory and still end up in a pretty good spot. And this is what I would recommend if you are absolutely not convinced on joining Young Labor, which is, someone who is an advocate for involvement with the Labor Party. I think he's actually kind of an okay path forward. One, you can keep your head down and just study Labor politics right now. So substitute time that you would spend with your Young Labor organisation instead reading books or watching Mr. M or whoever you find to be of value, or even joining the Buck Holton Academy. So there's the substitute of time, but then secondly, find an organisation to be involved with still that can still give you organisational experience, particularly with an ideological prism. And so I think, I've said this before, I think actually the political world has a lot to learn from ecclesial politics because they've been going on for 2 millennia now of how do we keep this broad ideological vision moving ahead, but also account for all the different interpretations that people will have within the faith, to make sure that we are, I guess, ideologically clear, ideologically consistent, but also a broad church that can accommodate for lots of different interpretations of said religion. So I've said this before, you've got primary fellowship issues, and then you've got secondary fellowship issues. And in the world of churches, you divide on primary, so that distinguishes between, do we consider you excommunicated or not? But then we have these secondary issues which allow for a little bit more debate. That's at least in the Protestant world. The Catholic obviously toes a harder line on ideological consistency. And so if you are involved with a church or a synagogue or a mosque or something like that, it can actually be a really good way to cut your teeth. Being involved in, I don't know, depending on what denomination your faith is, like things like a parish council or a board of elders or whatever it might be, can actually be really helpful, transferable experience that helps you understand the politics of navigating a broad church, but also trying to push forward an agenda and a direction at the same time. I guess sports club committees, it's less ideological, but might have some similar crossover there as well, particularly if you are part of a sporting club that does define itself by ideology a little bit more than just, scoring a try. And then you have volunteering groups as well, which are obviously very ideologically driven, but provide a lot of pathways to being on volunteer boards that are that allow for vision setting for the organization. So, I think those would be good opportunities to go and look for and try and get involved with. And if you are involved in a volunteering group, not just showing up and doing your Saturday, but actually seeing what other opportunities are available. Can I get myself down to, monthly Wednesday night meetings if I'm on a board for this particular volunteer group? I think those are all helpful, transferable experiences that will help you cut your teeth in the 20s, that will also give credibility to the party as well. So like if you haven't gone through the Young Labor experience, your asset becomes your new branch of networks that you know that are outside of Labor that can bring them under the Labor tent. It's experience in one particular line of work, which might have transferable power for if you end up as a minister for something. And then as well, it is also the broader experience of just navigating politics, which is avoidable in both unavoidable in both the public sector and the private sector. So if you are over 25 or whatever age it might be, and you think, it's past my time, I'm too old to get in the game now. No, you're not. You are never too old to go to your local Labor branch, and you are not too old to get involved in your local party, even if you have aspirations of holding political office as well. So view your experience outside of the party as an asset rather than a hindrance. The two work together. Like any successful organization works well with experienced DNA that can be retained over a long time, with fresh injection of new ideas that are coming from outside the organization, to make sure that inertia doesn't kick in as well. So I think the two work really well together. I'll use this as an example as I finish. Sir Alex Ferguson, one of the greatest football coaches, soccer coaches of all time, his golden rule was after winning a premiership every season, one player from the team had to be sacrificed. From the starting 11, one time he sacrificed David Beckham after winning a premiership. We have to sacrifice one player from our team in order to bring in another player. Even if that other player isn't necessarily better, we want someone who didn't get a taste of winning last year to come in and join the winning team to keep that hunger for winning the next premiership alive. And he sustained success over such a long period of time. So if you are outside the organization, it is not a hindrance. It can very much be an asset, and you use that to your advantage in joining your local party.